This story is about a man who controlled half of Manhattan's skyline, but couldn't reach his own son's eyes. It's about a nurse who once believed in systems until they broke her, and yet she never stopped believing in children. And it's about a boy silent for years who finally spoke. Not because someone taught him, but because someone truly saw him. What happened at that rooftop dinner changed 3 lives forever, and maybe yours too. It was supposed to be a quiet evening. The rooftop of the Marionette, 37 floors above the streets of Manhattan, shimmered in candlelight. Waiters moved like shadows through crisp linen tables. A soft quartet played something elegant and forgettable. At the center of it all sat Richard Delancey, founder and CEO of Empire Realty. Silver hair, sharper suit, colder eyes. His name opened bank vaults, moved mayors, bought silence. But it couldn't coax a word from his 9-year-old son. Noah Delancey sat 2 seats down, hands pressed tightly over his ears, rocking slightly. His dinner, a perfectly seared $180 sea base, sat untouched. Guests, investors, and board members all cast discreet glances his way, their polite smiles a thin veil over shared discomfort. He's sensitive to noise, Richard explained for the 3rd time that evening, voice low, jaw tight. One of the waiters nodded with forced sympathy and walked away. But someone else stood frozen near the service entrance. A woman in blue scrubs, not part of the restaurant staff. Her name tag read Alana. She was a fill-in nurse covering a private event's on-call requirement tucked into the corner in case a guest had a cardiac inconvenience. But she was watching Noah, not the wine list. She saw what others missed, the slight tremor in his fingertips, the stimming patterns, the way his eyes never quite landed on anything human. She'd seen this before, hundreds of times. Richard tried again. Noah, eat, please. He placed a fork in front of him like a demand. Noah shrank. The air thickened with judgment. A nearby woman whispered, "Poor boy. Must be hard with a father like that." Alana moved without thinking. One moment she stood in the shadows, the next she was beside Noah's chair, her presence soft but certain. She didn't ask, didn't explain. She knelt down eye level with him and began humming. A lullaby almost. Not cheerful. Something in a minor key, gentle and haunting. Noah's rocking slowed. Richard blinked. "Excuse me, what are you doing?" He snapped, eyes narrowing. But Alana didn't answer. Instead, she picked up a single piece of steamed zucchini. With her fingers slowly moved it in the same pattern Noah had been tracing on the table, circular looping. She matched his rhythm, his breathing. Noah watched. Then, without hesitation, he opened his mouth, took the bite, chewed, and swallowed. The table fell silent. The entire rooftop fell silent. Even the string quartet paused mid-measure. Richard's mouth parted slightly. He looked at his son, then at Alana. "How did you—" She didn't answer. She simply nodded, once, smiled at Noah, and returned to her post. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. Richard barely touched his steak. He kept looking at his son, who, though still silent, sat calmly eating from his plate, with the small, measured movements of someone finally unafraid. Later that night, as the elevator descended through marble floors and mirrored walls, Richard said nothing. He held Noah's hand, but the boy let go quickly, retreating into his usual silence. But something had shifted. Richard felt it in the pit of his stomach. Back in his penthouse with its 17 rooms and its unbearable quiet, he poured himself a scotch untouched and stared at the city below. He didn't know her name. He didn't know how she'd known. But he knew one thing: tomorrow he was going to find that nurse. Because something had happened on that rooftop, something no therapist, specialist, or $500,000 intervention had ever managed. For the first time in years, his son had allowed someone in, and Richard Delancey, master of deals and dominion, had no idea how it had happened. And that terrified him more than anything. The next morning, Richard canceled his meetings. That in itself sent ripples through Empire Realty's upper floors. A boardroom sat empty. 2 deals stalled. His assistant Meredith stared after him as he left the building in casual clothes. No driver, no entourage. Just Richard with a coat over one arm and Noah's uneaten sea base from the night before in a to-go container he couldn't quite explain throwing away. He didn't know where nurses went after working rooftop events. But he knew hospitals. And money. So he made calls. By noon, he was in the fluorescent-lit lobby of Lenox Hill Hospital. No appointment. No security. Just a billionaire waiting politely near the visitor information desk, like any other lost father. "I'm looking for a nurse," he said to the receptionist, lowering his voice. African American, maybe late 30s. Her name tag said Alana. The woman behind the counter looked skeptical. "Sir, we have over 6 dozen Alanas on rotating shifts." Richard exhaled, frustrated. "She was at the Marionette rooftop last night. Private event." Oh, the receptionist's eyes lit up with recognition. That was Alana Green. She covers neurodevelopmental overflow, usually night shifts, pediatric ICU. She scribbled something down. "She's not working until 9 p.m. Richard looked at the paper. Room 417A. Pediatric ICU. She works there, lives there, practically. The woman smiled. That evening, Richard waited. Not in the executive lounge or the glass cafe downstairs. No, the hallway. Hard plastic chairs. Vending machine coffee. He watched children in hospital gowns move down the corridor like tiny ghosts, their IV wheels clicking behind them. Then, at 9:12 p.m., she arrived. Hair pulled back, badge-clipped sneakers creased from real work. She saw him immediately. "You tracked me down?" she asked, one eyebrow raised. "I had to," he said. Alana looked down at her watch, then back up. "You've got 4 minutes before my shift starts." Richard stood suddenly unsure of his posture. I needed to know how you knew." "With Noah." She tilted her head. "You mean how I knew he wasn't being difficult? Just overwhelmed, yes. How I knew to kneel to hum instead of speak. To match his stimming patterns and feed him with fingers, not utensils." "Yes." He repeated, quieter now. "I didn't know," Alana said plainly. "I remembered." He frowned. Remembered what she gave him, a long, even look. What it's like to be misunderstood. To scream in silence. To need someone who doesn't flinch when you don't behave appropriately. Richard swallowed. Alana's voice softened. "I used to run a center. For children like Noah. I've worked with over 200 kids on the spectrum, ADHD, language delays. I taught parents how to meet their children halfway. Until..." She trailed off. "Until," he asked, gently. Alana looked at him, weighing the risk. "Until I got fired for speaking out. About funds being misused. About administrators pocketing therapy stipends. Suddenly I was difficult, too." There was no bitterness in her voice, just a sad sort of resignation. "I'm sorry," Richard said. And he meant it. But not just for what happened to her. Alana looked up at the clock. "My shift's starting," she said, turning. But before she could walk away, he asked, "Would you teach me?" She blinked. "Teach you how to be with my son, how to understand him." Alana hesitated. "I can pay," he added quickly. She winced. "This isn't about money, Mr. Delancey." He nodded. "I know. That's why I'm asking." She studied him. Not the suit. Not the posture. Him. The exhausted man beneath all of it. "Fine," she said. "You meet me here. Same hallway. 2 nights a week. No entourage, no phones, no suits." He blinked. "No suits." She smirked. "You're dressing like a father, not a CEO." And just like that, she was gone down the hall, swallowed into the sea of beeped monitors and crying infants. For the next 2 weeks, Richard showed up. Every Tuesday and Thursday night. In jeans, in silence, in discomfort. Alana met him with notes, worksheets, videos. She showed him how Noah perceived light, sound, texture. She taught him about compression blankets, visual schedules, and why flickering LED lights could trigger meltdowns. But more than that, she taught him to listen. "Stop trying to make him fit into your world," she said once. "Start asking for permission to enter his." One night, after an hour of role-play exercises and deep pressure techniques, Richard finally asked, "Why are you still working nights? With your resume, you should be running a program again." Alana looked away. "Some doors close forever." Then she added, almost too softly to hear, "Especially when your last name doesn't open them." He didn't respond. Not then. But when he got home that night, he sat on the floor of Noah's room. No phone, no scotch. Just him, his son, and a coloring book. Noah didn't speak. But after 20 minutes, he pushed a crayon toward Richard's hand. It was blue. The same shade Alana always wore. And that night, Richard didn't cry. But for the first time in years, he slept with the door open. Richard didn't cry that night. But the next morning, he didn't go to work either. He sat in Noah's room tracing the crayon lines on the carpet. The blue wax had stained the fibers a tiny arc like a horizon, or maybe a bridge. He stared at it for a long time, thinking not about buildings, but about patterns, about silence, about Alana, and about the question he hadn't asked her yet. That afternoon, when Noah was with his speech therapist, Richard returned to Empire Realty for the first time in 4 days. He moved through the office like a ghost. No greetings, no agenda. He stepped into the executive archive room without warning, startling the young compliance analyst who nearly dropped her clipboard. "Pull every record tied to our educational support programs," he said. "Sir, specifically, neurodevelopmental partnerships. Any disbursements between 2017 and 2020. Internal memos, budget reassignments, everything." The analyst nodded nervously and began typing. By the end of the day, a thick folder landed on Richard's desk, stamped "Confidential. Education Division." He didn't open it for a full hour. When he finally did, the silence in his office was deafening. There, it was line after line of clean-sounding language, masking something rotten. Redistributed funds, reduced programmatic return, consolidation of non-core services, and, at the bottom of one particularly clinical memo, terminate partnership with Riverside Learning Center. High liability, marginal PR benefit. His eyes locked on that line. Riverside Learning Center. That was Alana's old job. That was the place she said helped over 200 children. And it had been dismantled by him. Or, more precisely, by his signature. His pen had cost hundreds of children their safety net, including his own son, though he hadn't known it yet. The irony hit like a brick to the chest. He'd built a real estate empire on the promise of growth of sanctuary of homes. But he'd pulled the foundation out from under families who needed more than roofs. They needed voices, therapies, recognition. And somehow, in doing all that damage, he still ended up with the only son who couldn't speak. He leaned back, heart-pounding. This wasn't just guilt. This was exposure. Empire Realty had never been investigated for misuse of educational grants. But if this paperwork ever leaked, if Alana ever connected the dots publicly, it wouldn't just destroy him. It would destroy everything. Later that night, he stood in front of Lenox Hill again. This time, he wasn't sure why he came. Maybe to confess. Maybe to ask if she already knew. But Alana wasn't on shift. The nurse at the front desk said she'd taken emergency leave for the night. No explanation. Richard returned to the penthouse unsettled. He poured a scotch, didn't drink it, and paced the living room. He looked at Noah asleep on the monitor. Curled up calm. Safe for now. The next morning, he asked Meredith to cancel everything. Again. But this time, he told her why. "Pull any names tied to Riverside's final audit," he said. "I want to know who filed it, who signed it, and who got paid." The next 2 days became a spiral. More documents, more truths, and one name over and over: Joseph T. Malden, former CFO of Empire Realty. The man who had coincidentally just announced a run for state senate. The very man who had signed off on every strategic cut and operational reshuffle that gutted community programs. Richard felt sick. He had distanced himself from the day-to-day years ago. Let others handle non-core departments. Let PR write the speeches. He never read beyond the summaries. He hadn't just failed his son, he had failed everyone. That night he sat across from Noah with a peanut butter sandwich and a banana sliced into Moon's Alana's method. Noah tapped one piece twice before eating it, and Richard followed his rhythm, not questioning it. Then he asked softly, "Do you miss her?" Noah looked up, blinked, and for the first time he nodded. Richard closed his eyes. He'd made a decision. He wasn't going to hide the truth. The next morning he called Alana, straight to voicemail. "Alana, it's me. Richard. He paused. "I found out what happened at Riverside. I know my company was behind it. I didn't know then, but that doesn't excuse it. I want to make it right. I don't even know if that's possible. But if it is, tell me how." He hung up, not expecting a reply. That night he received a text. "Meet me tomorrow. 7 p.m., Prospect Park. Wear comfortable shoes." No signature. But he knew. He showed up early. The sun dipped behind the trees as Alana walked up in a hoodie and jeans, a coffee in hand, and her expression unreadable. "I got your message," she said. "I meant it." She nodded. "Then we're walking. And you're listening." They walked for hours. She spoke of the families Riverside had served, of the children who had regressed without care, of the staff laid off, dreams crushed, and of the board's silence, his silence. Richard didn't speak. When they stopped near the lake, she turned to him. "What you did wasn't a mistake. It was a decision. Not knowing doesn't make it harmless." "I know," he whispered. "I don't want your money, Richard. But you need to understand Noah isn't a redemption arc." He looked away, ashamed. "Then tell me what he is." She softened. "He's your beginning. If you let him be." He nodded slowly. The night ended with no deal made, no forgiveness exchanged. But as Richard walked back to the car, he noticed something he hadn't before. The trees whispered differently when you weren't trying to drown them out. And for the first time in his life, Richard Delancey didn't want to build another tower. He wanted to rebuild something else. But he hadn't yet realized he was about to lose everything first. 3 days later, Richard received a thick envelope delivered by courier. The handwriting on the front was unmistakably neat, controlled, and cold. Veronica Ellis, his ex-wife. Inside, a formal petition for full custody of Noah Delancey. Attached were glossy tabloid prints, photographs of Richard and Alana walking through Prospect Park. One showed them laughing near the lake. Another, more damning, captured a quiet moment where Alana's hand briefly touched his elbow. The headline across one clipped article read, "Billionaire heir's father replaces therapists with street nurse companion." Richard sat frozen in his office. Below the petition, Veronica's attorney included a 4-page statement. It detailed concerns over inappropriate professional boundaries, questioned Alana's true intentions, and highlighted Richard's neglect of elite recommended specialists in favor of an unlicensed individual with personal involvement. He barely noticed the final line. "We believe this environment is no longer emotionally safe for Noah." That night, Richard stood over his son's bed for a long time, unsure if he was watching him sleep or preparing to say goodbye. The next day, he called Alana. She didn't pick up, so he sent a text, "I need to talk to you. Not about me. About Noah. Please." 3 hours later, she was at his door. He handed her the envelope. She read each word, lips tight. When she reached the end, she didn't speak. "You don't have to get involved," Richard said quickly. "I'll handle it. I just thought you should know." Alana looked up. "You know they're going to come for me." "I won't let them. You can't stop them. They'll say I manipulated you, that I'm using Noah, that I'm some—" She laughed bitterly, "some social climber in scrubs. You're not. I know that. You know that. But they don't care." Silence fell. Then Richard said it, soft, trembling, "Not for effect, I need you." And Alana whispered back, "I need him." The next morning, the custody hearing was scheduled, expedited. Veronica was playing hardball. Richard's legal team warned him, If she brings character witnesses, we're in trouble, especially if Alana is called to testify. She's not a liability, Richard said. Not legally. Publicly, absolutely. Richard stared at the conference table. Then, without raising his voice, he said, "You're going to treat her with respect, or you're off the case." That afternoon, he called Alana again. "I need you to testify." A long pause. "You want me to go on record against a high-powered political attorney with paparazzi outside the courtroom?" "Yes. You're asking me to be dissected in public." "I know." Silence. Then her voice clear and sure. "I'll do it. For Noah." The day of the hearing, the courtroom was packed. Cameras clicked. Reporters whispered. Veronica sat composed in a sharp navy suit, her makeup immaculate, her smirk rehearsed. Richard sat beside his lawyer, jaw clenched. Noah was in a side room with a court-appointed child psychologist. When Alana entered, the temperature in the room shifted. She wore black slacks, a pale blouse, and no jewelry. Her hair was tied back. No makeup, no pretense. Just steady eyes and worn-out hands. Veronica's attorney rose first. He went in hard. "Miss Green, can you explain your qualifications for working with autistic children?" Alana responded calmly. "I have a master's in neurodevelopmental education from Columbia. I ran Riverside Learning Center for 8 years. But you're currently employed as a what night shift nurse?" "Yes. After Riverside lost funding." "And who pulled that funding?" Alana's eyes flicked to Richard. "Empire Realty." Gasps stirred. "Would you consider your relationship with Mr. Delancey to be personal?" Alana didn't blink. "My relationship is with Noah, the boy who used to scream at sound, who now sleeps through the night. Do you love him?" "Yes." "And do you love his father?" The courtroom held its breath. "I respect his father. I love who he's trying to become." A beat of silence. When it was Richard's turn, he stood shaking slightly. He admitted to signing off on the closure of Riverside. He admitted to never understanding his own son. "I built towers," he said, "but I didn't build a home. Not for Noah. Not for anyone like him." He turned to Alana. "She gave me my son back." Veronica's face hardened. Her lawyer scrambled to redirect. But the room had shifted. Even the judge seemed moved. When the decision was handed down, it came with stipulations. Richard would retain custody, but only under one condition. He had to step down as CEO of Empire Realty and fund a new neurodevelopmental foundation, fully independent, directed by professionals. No PR benefit, no board oversight, just accountability. Outside the courtroom, flashbulbs popped. Reporters shoved microphones in Alana's face. She said nothing. But later, alone in a quiet stairwell, Richard caught her just before she left. "Why did you say yes?" She smiled faintly. "Because Noah looked at me one day, and instead of flinching, he reached out. That kind of trust, you protect it." He wanted to ask her to stay, to build something together. But she was already walking away. And he wasn't sure this time if she'd turn around. He didn't know it yet, but the next time they'd speak would be the day he lost everything again. He didn't know it yet, but the next time they'd speak would be the day he lost everything again. It started slowly. A leaked video, then a blog post, then a full exposé. The footage was shaky but damning. Richard standing in the courtroom stairwell, reaching out toward Alana, who walked away in silence. The caption, "Exclusive billionaire begs nurse, after custody win." But what did he really give up? The post went viral within hours. Comment sections exploded. Another rich man hiding behind a brown woman's labor. He exploited her, then discarded her. So she fixed his kid, and now what, he's still a billionaire. Richard sat in his penthouse phone, buzzing off the table, watching it all unfold like a slow public unraveling. But the worst hadn't come yet. The next morning, the New York State Ethics Committee issued a statement. An inquiry had been opened into Empire Realty's misuse of nonprofit educational grants between 2017 and 2020. The words turned to white noise. He didn't even finish reading, because the moment he saw the name attached to the whistleblower report, Alana Green, his hands went cold. She hadn't warned him, hadn't called, hadn't asked for permission. She had simply told the truth. By Friday, 2 members of Empire's board had resigned. The stock dipped. Investors panicked. Richard's publicist begged him to release a statement distancing himself from that nurse. He refused. Instead, he called her. Voicemail. Then again. Still voicemail. Alana, he said softly. I saw the report. I wish you'd told me. But I understand. I do. I hope you know I'm not fighting you. I'm ready to face it. I am. He didn't know what he expected. Maybe forgiveness. Maybe just a reply. But none came. On Monday, he stepped down as CEO. He released a statement that didn't mention PR, or spin, or legacy. He only wrote, I failed to listen. To my son. To the people I silenced. This isn't an ending. It's a beginning. Then he disappeared. Not from the city, but from the noise. For weeks, he stayed in the background. Picked up Noah from school. Learned how to cook 3 meals without panicking. Attended group therapy for parents of nonverbal children. He didn't speak publicly. He didn't chase headlines. But one evening, at a corner library in Brooklyn, he found a folded flyer on the community board. Printed in cheap black ink, new center opening, staff needed, Riverside 2, 0. There was a tiny logo, 3 figures holding hands under a curved line like an arc. No address, no contact, just a date and time. Richard showed up early. The location, a vacant public school building being refurbished by volunteers. Inside, a woman was hauling chairs, her back turned. Alana, he called out unsure. She turned. Didn't smile, but didn't look away either. I figured you'd come, she said. You could have told me. I didn't owe you that. I know, he replied. Then, but I wanted to be part of this. She hesitated, then handed him a box of supplies. You want to help? Start with this? So he did. He painted walls, fixed wiring, donated quietly, never once asked for credit. One night, after hours of lifting furniture, she sat beside him on the front steps of the old building. I didn't do it to hurt you, she said finally. I know. I did it because I wasn't going to stay silent again. Not even for you. I wouldn't want you to, he said. They didn't say much after that. But they sat there until the streetlights blinked on. The week before opening, Noah came to visit the space. He walked through the sensory room, the quiet corner, the color-coded schedules on the wall. He stood in front of the mural the volunteers had painted 3 silhouettes under a crescent rainbow. Then he whispered, Mom Alana. Home. Richard looked at Alana. She was already crying. That night, Richard wrote a letter. He didn't know if he'd ever send it. It simply said, You were never just someone who helped my son. You were the first person who saw him. And in doing that, you made me see myself too. If you ever come back, not for him, not for the center, but for yourself, I'll be here. And I'll be ready. He folded the letter, tucked it in his wallet, kept it close. But he didn't know that before the center's opening day, something else was coming. Something no one expected. And this time, it wasn't going to be about him. He didn't know that before the center's opening day, something else was coming. Something no one expected. And this time, it wasn't going to be about him. 2 days before Riverside 2.0 was set to open, Richard received an email flagged as urgent. Subject, immediate legal action. Temporary injunction. Filed attached was a 12-page motion from the office of State Senator-elect Joseph T. Malden, the same man who once served as CFO of Empire Realty, and whose name littered the original disbursement files Richard had unearthed weeks ago. The claim that the new center, funded in part by Richard's reallocated personal assets, was built on land earmarked for public-private redevelopment under Malden's economic initiative. Translation. They were trying to shut it down. Richard stared at the screen. He could already see the headlines forming. Disgraced CEO's redemption project, linked to new scandal. Senator Malden moves to protect public interests from private fallout. He forwarded the email to Alana, then called her. She answered this time. "I just read it," she said before he could speak. Can he do this? He has political power now. And money. That's more dangerous than either on their own. Richard rubbed his face. "I'll fight it." Alana was quiet for a moment. Then, "We're not going to win this in court." Then, "How we don't go to court," she said. "We go to the people." The next morning, she made a call to an old friend, Imani Ross, a local journalist who once covered underfunded schools and forgotten neighborhoods before getting pushed into soft, human interest stories. Imani owed Alana. Years ago, Alana helped her autistic niece find a speech path. "Give me one interview," Alana said. "No edits. Just context. Real context." Imani agreed. Within 24 hours, the article was live. They tried to close the door again. But this time, she had the key. It chronicled Alana's full journey from educator to whistleblower, to nurse to director. It included Noah's story, the funding cover-up, the court case, and crucially, the political ties between Senator Malden and Empire's former grant divisions. The public response was volcanic. Parents who had lost services came forward. Teachers, nurses, former aides from the original Riverside, even a few investors from Empire Realty. By sundown, hashtags were trending: Josh let her build, Just Noah deserves, better, Josh Riverside reborn. Protesters gathered outside Malden's district office with signs that read, "This is what hope looks like, and we're not invisible anymore." Richard, watching from the sidelines, didn't say a word to the press. He wasn't the voice anymore. And that's exactly how it should have been. But then, just as things began to shift in their favor, Alana disappeared. She didn't show up to the planning meeting that night. Didn't answer calls. Didn't return texts. Richard drove to her apartment. Lights off. No sign of her car. Panic began to rise in his throat. Not the kind built from fear of failure. The kind built from something deeper. Loss. Then, around midnight, he received a call. Unknown number. No name. He answered. "Mr. Delancey, yes. This is Dr. Chen from Mount Sinai. You're listed as an emergency contact for Ms. Alana Green." His heart dropped. She collapsed during a home visit. Severe dehydration, exhaustion, minor heart arrhythmia. She's stable, but she needs rest. Serious rest. He was already grabbing his keys. At the hospital, he found her asleep, pale, but breathing steadily. A nurse stood outside the room. She hasn't been sleeping, barely eating, pushing herself. Richard pressed a hand to the glass. All this time she had been holding it all, not just for Noah, for the center, for him, for all of them. He entered quietly, sat beside her. For the first time in years, he didn't have words. So he did what she once taught him to do. He stayed. He listened. When she woke hours later, her voice was hoarse. "I didn't want you to see me like this. I needed to," he said. "You've been carrying everything. I thought if I stopped, it would all fall apart. It won't," he said softly, "because I'm not walking away." She blinked. For the first time in days, her eyes softened. "Did the center? It's still standing. Because of you." But both of them knew that wasn't entirely true. The media pressure had slowed Malden down, but the injunction hadn't been lifted. The legal process would drag. They had weeks, maybe months before they could open. Richard squeezed her hand. "I'll fight that battle. You rest." Alana exhaled. "Just don't let them turn Noah into a headline again." "I won't." He stood to leave, then hesitated. Before walking out, he pulled a folded envelope from his coat pocket and placed it on the table. The letter. The one he'd written, but never sent. Then he left, not expecting her to read it soon, or ever. But he didn't know that the real test wouldn't be legal, wouldn't be political. The real test was waiting for him in a sealed envelope he hadn't opened yet. An envelope Noah had quietly placed on his desk the night before. labeled in shaky handwriting, "For Dad, from me." And inside was the one question Richard had never asked himself out loud. Do you really know who I am? He held the envelope in his hands for what felt like hours. For Dad, from me. Noah's handwriting uneven, deliberate. The paper felt heavier than it should have. As if everything Richard had done, everything he had failed to do, was folded up inside. He opened it. Inside was a single sheet of notebook paper. 3 drawings. The first, a tall man standing alone under a dark cloud. The second, the same man sitting on the floor beside a small boy, both surrounded by blue scribbles. And the third, a trio man-boy and a woman with curly hair, all holding hands beneath a rainbow. Below the last image, Noah had written in large, wobbly letters, "This is the real me. Do you see me now?" Richard sat at his desk in silence. His throat clenched. His hands trembled. This wasn't just a drawing. It was a mirror. Noah had spent years locked inside a world where words didn't come easy, where sounds hurt, where adults towered and shouted and didn't listen. But somehow his son had found a way to say the one thing that mattered most. "I've been here all along. You just had to look." That night, Richard drove to the hospital again. Alana was sitting up, her IV removed, a notebook on her lap. She looked tired, but her eyes lit up when she saw him. He handed her the drawing, said nothing. She looked at each panel, her thumb lingering over the final image. Then, without a word, she held it to her chest. "Did you tell him?" she asked softly. "No. I think he already knew." She nodded. Later that week, the news broke. Senator Malden's office withdrew the injunction. A staffer leaked an internal email chain, proof that the land claim had been fabricated under political pressure. The blowback was swift. He issued a formal apology couched in meaningless language, but the damage was done. Riverside 2.0 was cleared to open. Opening day arrived on a gray Saturday morning. Rain threatened, but never fell. Dozens of families gathered outside the refurbished building. Children with noise-canceling headphones clutched soft toys. Parents held umbrellas and each other. Richard stood behind the ribbon, scissors in hand. But he didn't cut it. He handed the scissors to Noah. Noah looked up, uncertain. Then, Alana knelt beside him and whispered, "You can do this. Just like you did before." Noah sliced the ribbon with both hands. Cheers erupted. Cameras flashed. But Richard didn't look at the crowd. He looked at his son, standing tall, unafraid. Inside, the center pulsed with warmth. Color-coded classrooms, sensory safe zones, a quiet reading room with window nooks, a communal garden in the back. Laughter rang out in all directions. In the lobby, a plaque hung beside the front door. Riverside 2.0, in memory of those who were never seen, and in honor of those who never stopped looking. Below it was a second, smaller plaque, dedicated by Noah Delancey. "This is who I am." That evening, as the last families left, Alana and Richard sat alone on the back steps. Neither spoke for a long time. Then Alana said, "You ever going to ask me what I thought of your letter?" Richard smiled faintly. "No. I was too afraid you'd never read it." She reached into her bag and pulled out the envelope. Folded, creased at the corners. "Well read. You wrote, 'If you ever come back, not for him or the center, but for yourself, I'll be here.'" He nodded. She tilted her head. "I came back." He looked at her. "Why?" She paused, then answered, "Because I'm tired of being the one who disappears." They sat in silence again, the sky darkening above them, the scent of wet earth rising from the garden nearby. Later, Richard would walk her home. No security, no car, just 2 people beneath a quiet sky, their shadows long on the sidewalk. But before they left, Noah emerged from the building with something in his hands, a drawing. He handed it to them without a word. It showed 3 stick figures, a man with gray hair, a woman with curls, and a boy in blue. Above their heads, written in blocky letters, "Family." Neither Alana nor Richard said anything. They didn't need to. This story wasn't about redemption. It wasn't about saving anyone. It was about finally listening, about seeing, about letting go of everything that gets in the way of love. Too many families are still navigating silence, still waiting to be heard, still hoping someone will see them, not as broken, but as whole in a different language. If you know someone like Noah, or Alana, or Richard, share this story with them. And if you believe in second chances and quiet revolutions, in families built not from perfection, but from patience, subscribe, stay, listen. Because sometimes the person who changes everything is the one you almost didn't see.